It's time for the Caves of Chaos. We have been through the other two booklets. We have talked about the wilderness encounters and how to use the keep and make the most out of it, even how to create a kind of story that ties everything together. Now let's finish it up with a look at the Caves of Chaos book and how we can make this an exciting and awesome part of the starter set, Heroes of the Borderlands. The Caves of Chaos booklet is the biggest of the booklets, and they try to make it as easy as possible for you to run things, in that every cave fits on one open spread. You get to a particular layer, and you've got that nice sewn binding. It'll lay flat, and you get all of a layer on one section of pages. This makes it very easy to just know everything I'm running is always visible when I open up the book. Fantastic. But these encounters, these areas, the different caves that you're going to find can be pretty complex. And that's where I hope to help in this video. Give you tips to make them awesome, make them fun, and have a general approach to the caves so you don't get overwhelmed and your characters don't either. So as I said, there's a lot of material in here, and we want to figure out a way to not be overwhelmed. When especially you are a new DM, it's easy to just see this whole booklet and just think, I can't do this. This is just so much. Even though it actually is in those bite-sized chunks of 2 pages at a time, and things are in bold. There are sometimes in the beginning encounters, there is a how-to portion in there with sidebars that are very helpful. So it looks scarier than it actually is. And when you find a way to approach this material, it'll make it so much easier so you don't have to worry about it. So the first thing to do is how you're going to tackle, or how the characters will tackle the caves, and you help them do that. So an important part of this is we get this map that shows us right on the page 3 that the Caves of Chaos have levels associated with them based on the level of your characters expected to be able to handle it. So caves A, B, C, and D all can be handled by level 1 characters. And then some of the later caves in alphabetical order are level 2. Some of them are 3. So you can't solely go by level alphabetically, except at the very beginning. So even if your characters are level 2, it's a great idea to start with the level 1 caves and to lead your characters to those so that things ramp up in terms of challenge level. If your players are new, they will be still getting accustomed to these boards, to maybe their level 2 abilities, figuring out those spells they haven't tried before. And this may be in pressure situations in some of these encounters where it really feels like their back's against the wall, and you want them to first have the ground under their feet by having done easier encounters. So to do that, we want to share rumors. It can be within the caves themselves, it can be back at the keep, that the lower and closer caves, especially on the right, whatever that is, north side, is there? Yes, on the north side are the easiest. That general rumor can help us to get a basic orientation of which might be easier. Then also that box text that we get that tells about how this place has such a bad feeling to it. You can use it as an almost dowsing rod of, as they get to certain caves, you can let them know, oh, there is a terrible feeling to this cave, right? Or you can't imagine the number of bones that are outside of this cave. And you can just really make it pretty easy to say, like, make me a survival check, and you make me a blah, blah, blah check, and just, come up with a bunch of checks they can try that all indicate towards, yeah, things have died here recently, right? The bones of these things. And one of them is, a fearsome pack of jackals were all slaughtered out here, or, someone took down a bear, right? Like, that's scary. So maybe this isn't the cave for you. Right. And you can just say, and this is an important DM tip. Sometimes you are trying to communicate through a check something, and you sense that your players aren't picking up what you're putting down. That's where you can speak to them as players, and you can say, hey, your character made that roll. You as the player may not associate this, so I'm going to let you know. Your character knows that they have picked up clear signs that this cave feels really dangerous, maybe too dangerous for you at this time. Oh, you made it clear. right? Now, if they still want to go in there, cool. They may, come up with more magic or gold by going into the higher level caves, but generally they are smarter to go with the low levels first. You could even do something, speaking of magic items, around that. You could give them something like a wand of danger detection that one of the NPCs could give them to show them, which areas are not are the most dangerous, so they can avoid them. That's a possible thing. But honestly, I would just rely on skill checks and a general rumor to help. So what that does, right? Not only does this prepare the experience so that your players will have more fun getting through the easier ones first and getting a feel for the caves, help them build up and get stronger. It also means you can start with the level 1 caves being prepared for those. As they finish those up, what you want to do is at the end of a session say, okay, where will you be heading next? And you can even say, because I want to be prepared. There are a lot of caves in this book, and I will prepare based on what you think. And so that's where you can look at the poster map, and they can say, oh, we'll probably try this one and that. Great. Now if you've got 2 prepared, you'll be in a strong place to deal with the rest. And let's pull back and talk a little bit about prep. So in addition to those techniques, you're dealing with this big poster map, and it has a bunch of different caves on it. And you can put this down because this map, all it has is the cave letters, which are nice to refer to. And it doesn't have the additional level information from your DM map. So you can put this down in the middle of the play area to kind of help with these choices, right? And as they accomplish them, they can kind of scratch them off their list, maybe you keep a piece of paper over to one side and you just kind of scratch off, cave A as you do it. But this is a nice visual way that you can both be on the same page of where you want to go and maybe which ones they've established as, boy, those look really dangerous and should probably be kept for later, right? And then, so combined with the tackling of the easiest first, and then after that, asking them where they intend to go, you can have that clear discussion of like, okay, after they've done those initial caves, they want to try a cave E and F. Great. Got it. See you next time. And that's great. When you get into specific caves, you also get these maps. And in fact, don't forget that the map of the Caves of Chaos, which you'll lay down, also happens to have the map for Cave E on it. So you want to not forget and be like, where's my cave E? And oh yeah, it's under this the whole time. These maps do have all of the art that's being displayed, but they don't have any additional notes or traps or hidden information that would appear on your DM maps, which I'm going to show on the screen for you rather than hold up because it's a little harder to hold up the book. But the version in the book does have your special knowledge that you see, including things like the starting area and monster tokens and all kinds of things like that. And then what's intended is you will actually plunk down when they set out to enter a cave, you put down that map. Yes, that is sort of a spoiler in that they can't really see all of that, but it's okay. It's part of the fun of this being a game. We're going to go through and move through it. If you find that, and I would say try that. Try it for the first couple of caves, because I think it'll make play easier. I would probably do it at least through Cave C. If you find as you are going along that the maps and moving through these maps is a little too, that it gives away too much to see that outline and you want to surprise them more, I would still put down the map and then use pieces of cloth. Cloth napkins work great to just cover up sections. And based on, and kind of cover up like a room at a time if you can, so that you can just take one off as they move in a particular direction and reveal, sort of acting as a fog of war, reveal what they see as they choose which way to go. That can be a sort of thrilling thing to do towards the end, or as soon as you think that that would be a welcome experience for them. Whichever way you choose, when they enter a map, they will see some or all of this unlabeled poster map. You've got the secrets on your version, so you always do need to compare. You can't just use what you see on the ground the way the players will. You need to look at your secret version. And What you can do in some of these, and it's why I think that a few of the initial ones work well, is there will be this meta knowledge of the map that will drive the players to want to explore all of it. And that can be kind of helpful. So we'll talk about a specific example of that in a bit. This ties into not being overwhelmed, and that is to establish your cadence. We talked about this in all of the previous videos. It's very important to think as DM, okay, what is the kind of rhythm that's going to happen in play? And the rhythm that will happen here will be driven by a couple of different things, including the length of your session, but also wounds. As they take hit points, they will require healing, and they will run out of resources. They may use the magic items they've been able to gather, or potions, or things like that, and kind of go, okay, we're running low. And that's important. You can facilitate those conversations. Hey, is this a good time for you guys to stop and talk about how you're doing wound-wise, how you're doing health-wise, resource-wise? Oh, I'm out of spells. Oh, I'm low on hit points. Do you want to go back to the keep? Right? Also, that it may be good to check in with the keep, see how they're doing, share information. There may be some new quests, right? You can do a little bit of that. Go back and deposit some of your extra treasure back in the bank for safekeeping. These can all be good things to do. And this establishes the cadence of exploring in the caves, doing a couple of caves. And before you get overwhelmed, character-wise, but also you, the characters and the players will head back to the keep. The characters will rest, and you get that reset to go back and next session, practice, prepare a few more caves. Or you can, even if there's time left in today's session, you might run a cave or two. They go back to the keep. You run a quest or two, and maybe you do one more cave. But that combination of that cadence means that you just did one cave, and now, again, the session ends. You get to go back and take the time to prepare the next couple of caves they'll go to. So establishing that cadence is really useful as part of your prep. I will say, always important when you get an adventure book, I suggest reading all of it from the beginning to the end. New DMs, you may do this and go, but wait a minute, I just read this and I don't remember anything. And that's normal. But you do remember, it's just you won't retain every detail, but you will understand the flow of the adventure. You'll understand the general way that these caves work, the concepts of similarities, some important details will stick in there, and your mind will start to process some of these things. And when you see them next time, it'll be a much easier job, because again, these are only 2-page spreads. So if you can sit down for a couple hours, read through this entire book, it doesn't have to be in super detail, but just read through it in an hour or so. Because what is there? There are like 30 pages here, 27 pages. So read through it once. You don't even have to take notes. And then when your heroes are ready to go to the caves, that's when you can prepare the first level 1 caves. That's a little more prep, and you can make some notes. Get the monster cards out for the appropriate monsters, any NPCs that you need, and now you're set. And then you can again do your prep next time and do that in iterations, prepping a bit at a time. So this establishes that cadence, and it prepares you for what you're running at this time without getting overwhelmed. Over time, as you've accomplished a number of these caves being vanquished, all you need to remember are a few notes about what happened there. And it's worth doing that, keeping some notes somewhere where you have information on what took place. The wilderness and the keep tend to be pretty easy to remember. It's still good to take notes there too. So you might add to your cadence that at the end of a session, you just do some quick session notes, right? Capture things like, did you make up a name for a goblin? The leader of the goblin or the friendly one or whatever. Make a note of that. Did they make a promise, the characters or the NPCs, monsters, to the characters? Write the nature of that negotiation or promise down so that you can recall it and refer to it in the back. If you invented something that isn't in the book, making a little note of it is very helpful, right? So that you don't forget it later on. It's amazing how 2 sessions later, someone will bring up an NPC that you made up in the keep, and you'll say, yeah, what were they called? And it's really great if you wrote it down. So I highly advise notes. And if you like to, you can make those player facing. You can actually share your end of session report with characters, and that can actually drive players reading it and remembering what happened better. But I don't know that you have to do it for this starter set. It's just something to keep in mind. And what I would suggest, again, as your cadence, is that at the end of a session, you make at least notes for yourself to capture those things that you think you need to retain and look back on later. Including in this topic of cadence is advancement. The characters should probably be level 2 when they come here, based on the rest of what's going on, right? They probably should have had encounters on the trail. They did some quests in the keep, and even those, though they don't level them, they will lead them to want to explore in the wilderness. And they probably have explored enough wilderness that they'll be level 2. I think that's a great idea. Even so, though some of these caves work at level 1, it's a lot more fun if you're level 2 and you feel good about what you're doing when you explore those first few scary caves. There is an interesting thing where in D&D, and especially when those of us who've been around for a while were growing up, there was this idea that you had to test the players. In fact, the very books would often portray the game as adversarial. This book does a good job, or this starter set does a good job of saying it's not adversarial. We are cheering, you, the DM, me, the DM, we are cheering on the characters to succeed. We want them to really do well. We do also put barriers in the way because we're trying to reproduce a dangerous world and we're trying to provide fun challenges, but we are cheering them on and hoping that they will always do well. Characters and their players, conversely, they often want to feel superior and strong. They want to feel confident, awesome, right? You had a tough day at work or school, and you come to play and you get to be a hero and kick butt. That feels great. So it's really generally not a problem if you're level 2 fighting level 1 challenges and you easily vanquish your foes. Usually it's a great time. You feel really good about that, right? So don't feel as DM like you have to super challenge the party. That's not true at all. They can be having easy times and have a wonderful time. Now, if you find that your players act like they're kind of bored in combat, then that can be a reason to advance things. And you can find a lot of advice on my blog at alphastream.org on how to deal with situations where characters are not challenged enough. We have entire books like Forge of Foes that you can buy that I've written with great friends of mine to show how you can change up monsters to make them more challenging. But again, all in the service of the players. You only threaten characters so that you make it even more fun for the players. And that takes some time to learn what that's like. So I wouldn't be pushing to challenge characters in this experience, really throughout this entire starter set. There will be challenges naturally as their dice turn on them, as they stumble into some particularly strong creature, because these adventures are never written perfectly, and just that combination of events that can happen that can bring a bunch of enemies together at the, let's say, wrong time, creating a really big challenge. And we'll talk about that further. But yeah, the advancement is important. You're going to advance. The characters will advance to level 2 after they explore 2 caves fully, if they weren't already level 2. And after exploring 5 caves, they become level 3. And that's probably the one you most need to remember is, hey, when they have reached their 5th cave or finished their 5th cave, they become level 3. And that is an exciting moment. This is something to celebrate because they get to not only get a new class board, but it's double-sided, right? As I talked about in my video that reviewed the overall set, you get to flip and choose which subclass to use, and these can be some big changes. So you might actually want a session just to become level 3. It's a pretty neat thing and definitely worth, pumping up the characters for, like, yeah, they're the players. This is really cool that you get to do this. The original B2 adventure really lacks any large story. There's the keep, there are some wilderness things, there's actually even less story or narrative within each of the areas of wilderness. The keep sometimes doesn't even bother giving names to the NPCs in the original. So there is a lot more that can help make a narrative in this version of the starter set than in the previous one. However, some folks have said, wow, this is an adventure where nothing large is going on. There isn't a larger narrative or story the way there often are in D&D adventures, in movies, in novels, right? There isn't something like, a ritual's being conducted at the farthest part of the Caves of Chaos and you have 5 days to stop it. If you don't, everything goes wrong. Or there is this spy that on the 9th day will reveal themselves within the keep and strike down the leader. And if you don't, there's nothing like that. There are a couple of reasons for this. One is I think it's honoring the original, but I think more importantly, the reason they didn't change it is because in the Caves of Chaos, or in this starter set, the idea is that you can take turns DMing. And if they build a big sort of multi-step process, it makes it harder to switch out. Because this is more of a sandbox emergent play type of game or adventure, you are fine to just trade off. I can DM for this cave, and when we finish that cave, you can DM the next cave, and I can have fun entering it because it's really about that experience, and the story is the one we weave along the way, right? And also becomes kind of the narrative as well. So that is fine. I think it works fine as is. I honestly think you can have a lot of fun even without a larger narrative to tie it all together around then becoming the story based on what the characters do with that narrative. However, if you find that you want a larger story, you can do so in a couple of ways. And I mentioned this in my previous video, that you can, within the keep, emphasize the fact that this keep is being built on the edge of the Borderlands where danger abounds. This is like a bastion helping to protect and heal the land in this place. But the caves are a source of chaos. It's not exactly clear why to them. And there is the sense that if left unchecked, the keep will fall because chaos and evil will grow. This is actually true within the adventure. There is a powerful artifact. There is a powerful cultist. There is a cult that's growing in power. They're becoming more bold. They have strong allies. And if they win over enough of the Caves of Chaos to their side, they can probably attack the keep and take it. So really, you, the heroes, are those who can prevent this. And the larger narrative is this as presented, even if it's not spelled out, is the fact that there is this evil artifact, an evil cult leader who is putting into place all of the steps necessary to lead to the downfall of the keep, and you are stopping it. There just isn't an immediate timeline, right? So when we look at this larger story, what that means for the Caves of Chaos as an experience is you have some creatures that are just absolutely evil and are plotting at all times to bring down the keep, right? And they are fundamental to that larger narrative. Then we have creatures that live here for various reasons. Maybe they didn't feel welcome anywhere else. Maybe they're drawn to chaos, but they're not necessarily evil, right? They felt a calling to this place, maybe an almost ancestral calling, even though, honestly, they'd be quite happy enjoying a life of a baker, making baked goods, making cakes, and eating them. And then there are also some things that are clearly evil creatures, but they're not yet associated with these powers, and so they're not key, they're not fundamental to the destruction of the keep, but could play a role in it. And so the players get to choose which way they lean in various places, especially those who are not inherently necessarily evil, to sway them one way or the other. But to end that narrative, they must take out those key places. So let's spell out what those are. First and foremost, the alphabetically last cave is the seat of power for evil. It's the shrine of evil chaos, and your leader is Ivlis, the leader of the cult of chaos. She posed as the priest of the keep long ago, and you can pick up stories of this. So having the phrase Ivlis be uttered by different members within these caves can enforce that narrative and reveal that, wait a minute, that person we heard who used to be a priest and went off on sabbatical or whatever, she's apparently in charge of this chaos. Right? And that can be very interesting. She also has the Chaos Bell, an artifact that draws chaotic creatures and creates undead. So you could have members of these various caves share that they felt they heard a ringing of a bell in their mind. No one else in their clan heard it or their homeland, but they felt compelled to this, and it draws them. And in fact, They feel like it makes them fight one another even, and lose patience, become frustrated easily, right? It's making them evil and chaotic. So finding that chaos bell and destroying it becomes a big part of that narrative, right? So Shrine of Evil Chaos, Location K, that cave is absolutely the linchpin. In fact, it'll probably be the conclusion of our experience, or very close to it. Maybe the dramatic conclusion, if you will. Then Cave G is these shunned caves, which have a sort of interesting creature encounter, but then cultists and undead. They're sort of the other parts that connect to Cave K. They are certainly, all these cultists are plotting the overthrow of the keep. And they are all terrible people. And the undead, well, yes, those are unnatural abominations. So then we have the bugbear layer, H. This is also deeply evil. They are actively planning to attack the keep and really coming up with the plans. Should we do stealth? Should we do attack right on the keep through force of might? They are also clearly grabbing members from other caves and forcing them to serve them, and likely will force these cave dwellers to become part of the attack. So the bugbear layers are also critical. All three of these caves really need to be taken out in order for the keep to be saved. And that is kind of your larger narrative. Now, in addition to this, we have a few other options. In Area J, the Gnolls are evil and seek treasure. Clearly evil, and they might ally with the cultists, especially once they fail to find the treasure, but they are not yet associated with them. They've just shown up, probably. Cave C, the Nothic, is not yet allied with the cultists, but truly, truly evil in an otherworldly, terrible way, and could become a major danger to the land. And then in Cave I, the Minotaur is for now a solitary piece, but is deeply evil and could easily join the cult and serve it, especially if promised the right kind of rewards. So that is also something pretty terrible. Taking down any of these three is a great idea. The more, the better for the forces of good. And so for a more typical type of narrative, K, G, and H, those initial caves, those remove the threat. J, C, and I are additional ways to contribute to removing the chaos and evil in the land. The other areas, there we get to make decisions. The characters get to make these decisions as to what they assess as whether these are truly evil or not. Goblins are known to cause all sorts of trouble. And sometimes at best, they're like a group of bandits that you could befriend them, but they might still turn on you later, right? There is some of that to them. But one of the things we want to be careful about, and I just did it in that statement, is did I just classify a whole group of creatures, a species, as all having the same characteristics? Well, they're sentient, so it doesn't make sense. These goblins, we know, both have the capacity to care enough for each other to throw birthday parties, but also stole cake, and I'm presuming murdered the people who had the cake, right? But there is a discussion to be had, let's say, and that's really the point. Characters have a reason to discuss whether these goblins should be put to the sword or befriended. And as DM, I don't know the right answer. I don't have to know. I can put the situation out there. I can react to them. And as I speak as one or more of these goblins, a truth might emerge. Maybe it's the truth the characters want to project and I respond to, right? Or maybe I find myself leaning one way, and that might influence the players as well. And their characters decide up to the sword, or you're my best friend. I love you now. We are part of a goblin clan. It's really hard to predict what players will do. And they will do so very differently based on their particular view of the world, their age, the media they consume, any of it. So with all of these caves that are, let's say, that could go either way, they become far less critical to visit. They're fun. You want to visit them because they're neat with fun encounters, but the overall narrative doesn't hinge. And so it's kind of nice that a lot of the important caves are the later ones. And so we can deal with some of the ones that are neutral and individually evil, and then end with, probably in most typical campaigns, you will end with the big leaders and the artifact and take that out last. And again, you can use those sort of pacing techniques that we talked about before. to establish, ways that you say, wow, that looks really dangerous. You may not want to go there yet, and keep those till the end so that you have a more typical experience, more of an expected experience. But again, that isn't necessarily for everybody. Someone else might have a lot of fun going straight to the biggest problem and taking that out, maybe surviving, maybe having a total party kill. Maybe that's fun for you and your group. And if so, wow, jump in and do that and make up new characters and try something else. So it depends really on your group and what you'll like. So I want to make that clear that even though the most typical experience is usually fun and rewarding for most groups, every group is different. And maybe you just want to throw yourselves at some caves and see what happens and get lucky and roll some 20s and take down the level 3 threat at level 1. It's possible. All right, so I want to give some advice for running each of the individual caves. And again, read all of the book, figure out with your cadence how many you think you're going to be running, plan for those level 1 caves initially, and do your best to make sure the players go that way, unless you love just improvising, and that's fine too. And then figure out, which ones to prep little by little. But before you run a cave, I would make sure not only that you've read it once, but the way I would approach it personally is I would have read it once, and then I would have prepared it a second time prior to that session. Each cave has some complexity. There's almost nothing in here that is, you walk in, there's some monsters, just take them out. There are a couple of rooms within layers that are like that within a cave, but a cave overall tends to have a combination of something is happening, there is some sort of story to figure out, is someone you might be interact with, befriend, negotiate with. There is a trap, something secret, right? There's some complexity like this. And so having the time to read over it, even though they're just 2 pages, is great. Now, one thing that's cool about this format is you really could say, let's get together and play for 45 minutes, say each day, like lunch at work or coffee after work, something like that. You really could get together and do a cave in like 45 minutes and just have a blast, right? Some groups would want more like an hour, but it's possible to run these pretty quickly, and preparing from them would really be very easy. So you could literally say, hey, tomorrow, which one do you want to do? Oh, let's do, B. All right, great. I'll prep B. I'll see you tomorrow. Right? You could run it that way for a group and have a blast to just go through these and explore them. But let's talk about each one. So the first one, A, is the Kobold layer. And this is ideal to start with, as it has some sidebars, as we've seen in the past. It's got these neat little sidebars that are all numbered and tie into the text, giving you advice on how to handle things. The rhythm of play of describing the scene and putting down tokens and all of this, right? It's good. Make sure you read through that so you know what that advice that they're giving you. For the Kobold layer specifically, it is a really nice starter cave because it provides several types of experiences and is fairly open as to how the players handle it. When preparing, I like to think through the key elements in encounter. So starting off here is the trap at location A1, which leads to one lone kobold who comes to check them out. And a way to prepare for DMs is doing what I'm doing right now, which is say it out loud, except instead of your streaming audience, you're saying it to like the mirror or the wall or whatever, your favorite miniature. Having this lone kobold comes out is a great way to inject role-playing into things and make it surprising, right? You're not expecting that when you fall into a trap that one lone goblin comes out and goes, ha, gotcha, right? And that's where I'd want to think about, well, what is this kobold going to say? And probably what I'd prepare is something that would be naive and full of bluster and be kind of obviously so, right? Like, captured, you're mine now. All of you should surrender. Oh, my boss is going to be so happy, right? And they're like, what? There are 4 of us and 1 of you. Like, it doesn't matter if 1 or 2 of us in their pit, we could take you out. And encourage the players to get the best of this guy, right? To get the upper hand by convincing him, talking to him. Of course, they might also just murderize this kobold, and that's fine too. Let the chips fall where they may sometimes, but at least they will know, hey, this kobold didn't actually look like a huge threat or particularly brilliant in terms of fighting us. So, maybe we could talk to the next group, right? If they do talk to this one, what I would suggest is that he would direct them east, the characters east, which then sets up the kobolds to request that they fight the centipedes, so that the characters then go back to the west, fight the centipedes, come back, and then deal with the dragon wormling. And this is one of the fun areas that's been added to this. That the original really didn't have scenes like this, the old B2. This is great. It's a lot of fun where they have managed to capture a dragon egg. It's hatched, and now they don't know how to parent it. And if you've been a parent to a newborn, you can identify with this scene. Ask the parents in your life. They'll be glad to share stories of what it's like to raise a creature, and not know what to do with it. It's the best thing you ever do. It's wonderful. But boy, it does keep you up at night. And that's exactly what's happening here. You're walking in on some parents that didn't know what they're getting into, who have not slept in days and are exhausted and have no idea how to make this dragon happy. And that creates a lot of opportunity for the players and their characters to decide what they want to do with this group, right? Even if they murderize the first kobold and some of the second groups of the kobolds, this last batch gives them another opportunity to discuss and handle things differently. And if not, hey, whatever is fun. If they decide to murderize everything here, that still could be a blast. And if it's a combat-heavy group, they will enjoy that, and that's all fine. But you can, if you think that they would enjoy ending hostilities, you can make it clear that the kobolds they're fighting look worried, that they hear, and you hear too, the sound of this crying creature in the distance, and they look worried. They're not enjoying whatever's going on. So there's something to be learned. Maybe they look tired, like they haven't slept in days. Those are interesting questions. Do you want to try to stop the combat and see what they know, right? How hard you push that, there's no right answer. It depends on your group and whether you think your group has just overlooked the possibility of this experience or even wants this experience. And if they just want to have fun fighting kobolds, well, then you can give them that, and that's super fun too. All right, so that was Cave A. Cave 2 takes us to some Mephits. The Mephit cave we ran at conventions as a sort of sample, and it can go very well. It can also fall flat. I think it needs a little bit of DM hand-holding to make it really fun. The Mephits are sort of agents of chaos, but they're more like tricksters. And one of the important things to establish when things are tricking characters is that the players know the Mephits are doing this, you're not doing this, right? That you sympathize and you are on the side of the players, but you're portraying what the Mephits are doing. So showing them to be tricksy and making clear that that's what they do gives them the upper hand rather than you coming off as pulling a fast one on them. A great way to do that is in location B2, where that one Mephit just breathes, but the breath does nothing except, just create some fog. That's a great way of showing, like, make me an insight check. Oh, you realize that they are, these are really tricksy creatures. They love kind of tricks, but those tricks could hurt you if you're not careful, right? Okay, that sets the stage. One of the challenges in this scene is you can end up with a situation where the Mephits sort of trick you into going a certain way. You haven't fought any of them yet, and then a fight happens between several Mephits and Kuo-toa, and that can be a hard fight, especially if they're lower level. So, and some of the other caves have situations like this as well, where a number of monsters could come together at one time, and that becomes really difficult. So you may want to find ways to diffuse that. Either have some of the Mephits grow bored and leave so that the fight is smaller, or allow a way that they can talk the Mephits into not fighting them, right? Just find some way to diffuse the situation if it's too hard, so that you don't just die in a way that would feel one thing to have your leg pulled, but actually getting murdered over what seems like just chaotic creatures amusing themselves could not be so much fun. Random here, but D&D tends to have a great habit of, in its adventures, having a vocabulary quiz aspect to it. And you will find in the part that describes the Kuo-toa, the word rupestrian. And I had to look it up, which means occurring on rocks or cave walls. I would recommend that you lean into the time-honored tradition of teaching everybody at the table a word that you did not know and what it means. So when you see a word that you don't know, look it up, share it with the group, And that is a big part of D&D tradition. There's a tough question that comes in situations like where all of these monsters might be together, come together and create a big challenge. How to handle players and their characters being in over their heads. Do you just let it play out the way it might go? Challenge can be fun, but a total party kill or TPK is memorable, but it's not necessarily fun. It does build character. So avoiding 2 enemies is probably the way to go. Have a reason to have, say, some of the Mephits hang back and then join in later so that it's not too many monsters all at once. In general, keep an eye out for the visual looking down at the character boards of how many hit points are left and let them know, hey, you seem like you're low on health. And even if they think that all they've got left in this cave is to go check out the treasure chest, in D&D, you can never be sure of when you're safe. So if they're hurt, encourage them to take a short rest before they go and trigger something like that treasure chest, which can be a tough fight with that mimic and even harder if the PCs are low on hit points. The dice can always abandon players and surprise you and make things much, much harder. You can find ways to sort of avoid a TPK, and sometimes it's worth it for some of these encounters. If you think, wow, it looks like a lot of things could happen here, make it hard. How do I avoid that, right? So one possibility is to have a group that they've already befriended come into the scene, right? Let's say they meet the Kobolds and befriend them. And then they go into the Mephits, and now the characters are looking like they might go down. Have this Kobold expedition going, and yeah, I knew they went this way. I bet they found treasure. Oh my God, they're in trouble. I probably wouldn't say, oh my God, oh, looks like they're in terrible trouble. Let's fight for our new allies. And the Kobolds save the day, right? You don't do that all the time, but for this one time, maybe they get out of jail free card provided by Kobolds or whoever, some other group they've met. And the fact that they befriended them pays off. Now, this group probably wants some of the treasure in exchange for having saved them, but they get to live. The characters get to live, and that's kind of useful. So worth keeping in mind as a way that, one or more allies can come in. It can just be even a few kobolds, right? Because even having a few targets that enemies can attack takes the pressure off of characters and gives them a little bit of relief so that they can try to make a stand and take down some of the enemies. Cave C is the Nothic. Nothics are very evil creatures, and this is the kind of thing where it's helpful to go through your stack of cards and go, okay, what is this Nothic? And, not only does it look completely otherworldly and terrible, but reading on the back, shows you that this is consumed by their thirst for forbidden knowledge, their cursed lore seekers transformed by secrets never meant to be known. Their bodies, these former scholars, are warped into otherworldly shapes, each with a head dominated by a gigantic, unblinking eye. And if you read the full monster manual, these are evil creatures. And even as described here, this is an evil creature. So yes, you could possibly partner with this thing. But is it a great idea? No. And in this adventure, in this cave, you are given the choice of whether you want to negotiate with the creature in C5. I would think most heroes would not want to do that, but who knows? Maybe they want to. Maybe the point of this adventure is sort of to say, hey, you've been given a choice that you probably don't want to take as heroes, and so how do you handle being in that situation? Rather than which do you choose? I'm not sure what was intended. One thing is, that if you do want this conversation to happen, if you look at the map, the creature at C4, the carrion crawler, that carrion crawler, you want to move that further back or put maybe like a curtain up in that place, something so they don't just see it, because as written, it says that when the carrion crawler sees creatures, it will attack. And so there's no way someone will go in and have a conversation in C5 without having taken down the carrion crawler. Remember also, you have this map that's going to be out there. So even if you describe that there is a piece of cloth there, they'll know that there is another chamber there and probably want to go to it. If they look into C7, they will realize that is some sort of storage room and it's locked. It looks important. Maybe it has treasure. And that's where maybe they end up fighting the Nothic, even if they made a deal with it in C5. So this is a case where this knowledge of this storeroom and that probably has something important in it is a good way to lead to a fight. And the Nothic can be like, what? No, don't mess with that. Never go in there. It's mine. That kind of thing. And then that also helps establish things. So probably what will happen here is this is a battle, but it may involve some discussion up front. D is your goblins. And the surprise in this encounter is right at the beginning when they realize that, there is this in goblinish written attempt to say happy birthday. And it lets you know things are not what you seem. It maybe is more interesting if you find the NPC that is in area D2 who wants something the Goblin King has. That creates a kind of tension that's fun, makes it a less certain what they'll do. And there is a reveal in area D3 of why the keep had no cake. Do the players care? Maybe they can use this when they go to D4 to their favor, right? There's some opportunity here for negotiation. And what do you do with this knowledge of that they like parties and cake and things like that? Like maybe it's as simple as agreeing not to attack future caravans. Maybe you hire them as guards in exchange for a small cake, right? Characters might come up with any number of neat ideas like that. We will give you a cake each time that a caravan comes through if you make sure nobody attacks it. And they might be like, yeah, totally awesome. We now love cake. And those are the kinds of absurd things that can be a lot of fun to facilitate for players if you see that they are excited about these ideas, right? See what they offer up and run with it. And throw in a goblin angle to it, whatever you think that might be, and see how the players respond back, right? Like, wow, we need more cake. Like we really love it. It doesn't come very often, right? What are you going to do about that? One thing you should do in these negotiations is be prepared to answer what is in area F. This is one of the caves where creatures live in one area, D, but there is a hallway that connects to area F, which is the Hobgoblin lair. So they're going to probably say like, well, what's behind that door? Oh, that leads to another area. Whose area? The Hobgoblins. And that's an opportunity to actually share information. Hobgoblins, we're going to find out there is a question as to what attacked them. And so maybe the goblins don't know, but they could say, we heard a lot of fighting in there. We're not sure. We don't hear lots of people moving around. So maybe there are no more hobgoblins, right? That could be interesting. And the spider similarly protects a secret door to the ogre lair. So this is a very interesting area, though the characters may not see any of this. They may just leave the Goblin King and never ask about the door behind them. They may never check out the spider web. The spider is in a position they start hidden. They've got that web that really clogs up that whole area, so it's not easy to see, and there's darkness, around the corner. You have to get into the webs to possibly see the spider. And so that presents this awesome ambush opportunity, very scary. And even with the maps that are there, the kind of courage, knowing there's got to be something around here we want to look, super fun. And then, of course, there's the secret door they may or may not find. I will say, when I'm running D&D for kids, it's surprising that at some point you can actually scare them. And it's a lot about your descriptions, but the situations as well. There have been cases when I've run an encounter similar to this where I describe the webs and the darkness and the creepiness, and then they go, we leave. And that's okay. You don't want to necessarily push them to overcome things, but it can be good to give some space and then say to kids, by the way, I know that looked really scary, but your characters, after they've had some time to calm down, realize, probably they are strong enough heroes to handle whatever may be there. And just leave it up to them as to whether they want to come back to something that's creepy. But I wouldn't push them into it or force their hand on it. They have to want to do it and to stand up to that danger, because kids are smart enough to know I care about my character kind of in a different way that I care about me, but I care about this character that I'm playing and I don't want them to die, right? This is not like a video game where I just respawn, so I care. And that makes a lot of sense. So. All right, let's go to E. E is an interesting one. Again, this is the map that's on the back of the Caves of Chaos. Don't forget that. The ogre is tough. And with this dragon wormling, even tougher. But Cindertooth, the dragon wormling, is the kind of foe that might stop fighting and allow PCs to promise a service to avoid death. Similarly, the ogre might say, I think I've given you enough of a thrashing. You work for me now, right? And let the players come up with a fun way to like get out of these arrangements, but he might force them to agree to it. And then give them a job. Like, you've got to go finish off the hobgoblins. I was told that, they didn't do what the cultists wanted or something like that. Whatever your story is for why the hobgoblins are gone, maybe he sends them there. It could end up being just the same as adventuring, but in theory, you're supposed to work for the ogre. The ogre's not super smart. So, there are a lot of possibilities here. If you have too tough a fight in E, how one or both of these creatures could stop the fighting and prevent the TPK and create a funny situation. All right, we've got our ogre art down, but let's move from ogres to hobgoblin lair. There is a lot of uncertainty in this cave. This is one where, as a DM, as I read about this encounter area, I'm not exactly sure what will happen. Will the characters come in and negotiate with this hobgoblin? And maybe get gobbled up by the cube while the negotiation's taking place. Now, this monster, Jelly Cube, is interestingly differently named than the typical monster known as a gelatinous cube. The art is the same. Are they the same creature? Well, what's interesting is the description of the Jelly Cube lacks the features that appear in the regular monster, which include it being described as invisible. So I don't know that this is actually invisible. It says insatiable block of ooze. And the art doesn't show it as being, transparent completely. So I think, though it is of course up to you, that this can be seen as it approaches. So that would be, quite freaky and maybe opens up some negotiations with the hobgoblin. What is that? Well, it lives here. It keeps it really clean. We keep it back with these barriers. And, maybe that changes the natures of negotiation. Or maybe it creates the opportunity for the hobgoblin to launch attack if the characters are already attacking. You'll have to decide kind of how you want to play this if you don't use it as invisible, which I think is what's intended by the adventure. But it's your call. The statistics and even the CR, the challenge rating that's used to decide how challenging encounters are the same on this as in the other monster. It's just that difference that it doesn't spell out that it's invisible. The hobgoblins are motivated by the fact that they've just been sorely beaten. It says here that they were raided, but it doesn't say by what. You can make this up. But it's important to come up with some sort of answer because PCs will probably ask at some point, what happened when they realize, oh yeah, there aren't that many of you. And, you were lying to me about your initial box text of how many are here, which it says, 30 hobgoblins strong. So what happened to all those hobgoblins? Maybe it was the cultists. Maybe there's some common ground here. Maybe the bugbears and cultists hired them to attack the keep soldiers and the soldiers prevailed. In fact, one of the interesting things could do is right before the characters go to Cave F, if you know that F is one that they're going to go to next session, you can have by saying that some soldiers return to the keep badly beaten, and they say that forces from the caves attacked them, ambushed them as they were traveling, right? But they prevailed. And then that could be the result that Cave F is now depleted because it wasn't that they were raided. The hobgoblins went out on a raid, and they were defeated, and so only a few are left. You can decide kind of what the story is, but I would come up with some story that you like and be prepared for the hobgoblin to share that. And then the gelatinous cube just sort of happens to live there, so it's kind of a truce with the hobgoblins. We don't control it. It doesn't want to try to go past our barriers. So here we have it. We're at an impasse. The characters can decide whether they want to take out the hobgoblins. Hobgoblins are generally evil and militaristic. But this group might not be. That is to be decided. One of the interesting things about these cards is they don't have something in Dungeons & Dragons called alignment, which says whether you're sort of evil or good or chaotic or law-abiding. It doesn't give us that here. They tend to be lawful and evil. But here we don't have that information. So all we have is the general guidance in the book. And you'll have to decide whether you think these hobgoblins are creatures that can be Because again, not all of a species are the same. So are these hobgoblins, yes, militaristic, and yeah, we're doing these various evil things in the Caves of Chaos, but they actually can be reasoned with and could be forces for good? Maybe, or at least neutral. If convinced to not ally with the cultists and that's going to be a failure, would they then just be glad to just be here and not cause further trouble? Up to you and the characters to decide. So there is potential here, and that's why these hobgoblins aren't part of the critical mix, right? We don't get a clarity that they are in league with Team Evil. So you get to decide, and the characters get to decide how that plays. But now let's move towards Team Evil, because caves G and H and I, and those are all coming up. So G is the shunned caves. This is a combination of an owlbear cave, and then behind it, up and above it, are cultists who are staying there, and they don't worry about this other entrance into their main area because of the fact that there is this owlbear. This plays best when you introduce it, maybe through through another denizen of a different cave that says, hey, it's a dangerous way to sneak in to deal a blow against Team Evil, but if you want to take out, the leadership, you could come in through the owlbear cave. You just have to survive the owlbear. That seems tough, but if you can do that, well, the cultists, they'll probably be resting. They don't ever come out that way, so they must not they wouldn't expect any attack from there. And you could reward such an attack by having the cultists maybe provide some sort of information as the characters are attacking. Like they might even shout out, to each other, like, make sure they can't reach the chaos bell or something like that, that suggests the importance of area K, which is connected to this cave G. So G, I think, plays best right before you get to K as an option for dealing with K, kind of G and K as a connected area. And G can be an alternate entrance. They can decide between those. That's kind of fun. Do you want to go in through K directly or through G facing this dangerous denizen? That can be a neat choice to sort of end the areas of the Caves of Chaos. Which would mean that before it, you would go to area H. This is the Bugbears. And I like the Bugbears a little earlier because they provide good story that reinforces what Team Evil is doing. They fit into that larger narrative we were talking about. Bugbears do hit hard, and they have the ability to do an attack, which is a grab. So they deal 2d6 plus 2 bludgeoning damage, and if the target is medium or smaller, they are grappled. So it makes it really hard to escape them, right? That means that in this particular Cave H, you want to, ideally, if you're the characters, avoid taking too much damage before you hit the Bugbears, especially a bunch of Bugbears, because retreat would be really difficult. Again, maybe some other group helps, or the moment they get lucky and escape a grab, they can run off, but it's pretty difficult. They might have to negotiate or bluff their way through things, come up with deception as a plan to prevent being totally overwhelmed by the Bugbears. Also possible the Bugbears would, lock them up in one of the caves. That's a possibility, or say you've got a network for us now. You can decide how to avoid a situation where they would be overwhelmed. But what's really neat plot-wise is the Bugbears are working with a map of the Keep of the Borderlands. And they can see that, and you could just have some rough notes scribbled on it that suggest that they're planning an attack and debating what approach to use, stealth or an outright frontal assault. That's pretty cool to know, right? Important information they might want to get back to the keep, and also shows that when you take down the Bugbears, you've taken down a major threat. I also like, as I mentioned before, reinforcing what's already in here, which is that these goblins that are here have been kind of conscripted. They've been forced to be here by the Bugbears. Maybe they really just went over to the Goblin Cave and said, no birthday party for you. You are our soldiers, right? But we're planning the birthday party. No, you're with us. And so the goblins don't really want to be here. They've been told that they have to serve, right? So this creates some possibilities to understand the Bugbears as part of these cultists, and that they will take over the rest of the Caves of Chaos and force even neutral parties or potentially neutral parties into being evil. You should also have some fun in Area H5 with the names. I think the goblin names of Gargle and Yams are so good that just feel free to yell them out between each other, or other monsters yell them, because when you hear a name like Gargle and Yams, I mean, it just makes the characters want to interact with that. Cave I is the Minotaur lair. This is a complex encounter because when you come in, you want to kind of play it in phases. First, the Sturges, but they see the light from the beetles. So it's a combination of dealing with the Sturges, which can be pretty deadly because they automatically damage you. Then looking into the beetles, realizing they're not a threat and they can actually help you in a way. And then later, as you move into that cave further and explore and get into sort of its maze-like feeling, which you can heighten up with descriptions, that's when they might have a fun situation of spotting the secret door because of their beetle, and then the Minotaur charges, right? Kind of good news, bad news kind of thing. That can be a very neat situation. The Minotaur cannot be reasoned with. It's deeply evil. Area J is a little bit complex as well because it is a Gnoll lair, but not really their lair. They have arrived here probably recently in the last day or so, one would imagine. No more than a day, because they're searching for something and haven't found it yet, and it doesn't seem to be all that hard to find. Let's start with the beginning, which is that there's this entranceway and this door that has a trap on it. And a fun thing to do would be to have a creature in Area J2 that's going through the junk, like a bugbear or some other creature is sifting through the junk quietly. And the party comes in, if they trigger the alarm, now they're caught too. Normally the bugbear would be a foe, but having been caught, is this an enemy of my enemy situation? And maybe they work together against the Gnoll and then fight each other. You could have fun with that if you like this kind of complexity, or keep it the way it is and just deal with the alarm and whether the Gnolls react or not. The Gnolls are super evil. They're not yet on the larger team evil of the cultists, but they easily could be. So stopping these terrible creatures would be good. The mosaic, there's a mosaic they're looking for in area J4. I would say that it's elevated, and that's why the Gnolls are just going around pressing in very obvious places and not finding it. But you, the smarter character, you think to reach up top and discover this invisible area or illusory area, and that leads to the next area. Now we get to our last location, Area K. As I said before, it might be that you want to provide that option of going to G or K. Think through how you can shape the experience to allow for choice, but sort of the end being at the end, if you think that's a better narrative that will be fun for the characters, or just let it go however it goes. Maybe they killed Team Evil from the very beginning and they're just exploring other layers. That's fine too. But if they get to what's intended to be the last one, the Shrine of Evil Chaos, this has sort of that payoff of defeating Team Evil. But before we get that, in K2, which is right inside the entranceway, you get to meet an ogre zombie. And I would underscore the resemblance to the other ogre, which if they happen to talk to that other mercenarial living ogre, they realize this is his dead brother. And he had some thoughts on that brother. So, maybe this is something that other ogre, if they made peace with it, would be happy that you put his brother to rest. Could bringing up the brother to this zombie somehow bring something up in the mind, the latent mind of this zombie, and cause it to maybe hesitate for a second? You get to decide these kinds of things, right? That's the fun of being your turn at DM, is you can decide whether this ogre zombie maybe hesitates and doesn't, unleash its full attacks as it, worries about the brother. That you can have fun with it and decide how it is. An ogre zombie is no joke. They hit really hard. So it's a dangerous thing. And giving a round where it thinks about things isn't bad in terms of balance. You're going to fight some cultists. You're going to see the chaos bell. This is what is causing the evil to rise here. Not only is it capable of summoning undead, which is really bad, but and you'll see that when the characters will see it when they come into this place, but it has a corruption around it that is palpable, right? So destroying this bell is really important. And then later in Area K7, you're going to find Ivlis. This is the former priest that used to be in the keep, and she is a member of the cult. She is helping to bring these caves of chaos and use this artifact to bring about the downfall of the keep. So the culmination of the heroic quests can really be destroying the bell and defeating Ivlis, which can lead to that conclusion in the back of the Keep booklet we talked about. This one down below where everybody has this celebratory feast, right? So you can go with that and say, okay, you get this feast because this is the feast that happens when you destroy a powerful artifact, which involves going to the wilderness area. It tells you how in here. And, bringing down the threat of this priest without, sounds funny, but without organization, the chaos kind of comes down, right? And without that artifact. So that having this sort of party and celebration is really a sound way to end this as a sort of mini campaign or starter set experience, right? At this party, consider having favorite NPCs make an appearance, right? This can allow for some last interactions with your favorite NPCs, and you get to role play them, characters get to interact with them. So as you conclude the adventure and the party winds down, you can ask the characters what they want to do for the next few months, right? They have some time without immediate threats. There might be a couple of caves or wilderness areas they want to explore, which you could do in character or just hand wave and describe it. But what do they really want to do? Do they want to stay at the keep? Do they immediately head out? Maybe they try to assume an important position at the keep or become members of the guard and try to escalate through their, become the leader of the keep or join the nobles that are heading it up. That can be an interesting question to ask. If the PCs are being retired, meaning you're not going to play with these character boards anymore, this is the end, you're going to make new characters for a new adventure, maybe starting at level 1 with a different published adventure or your own creation, you can retire these PCs. And there it can be fun to think about what has happened 5 years from now. Did they stay here and become the actual leaders of this keep? Are they now like the priest and the head of the guard and maybe the head of the nobility? And one of them is now leading up a merchant caravan that comes in and out and connects to other towns. Maybe they've expanded and they have their own castle next to the keep, right? You can ask them for those kinds of dreams. It's a fun way to end a campaign by asking what you do some period of time afterwards, right? And in this case, for new players, I'd probably choose something that's pretty close in. So something like 5 years, 10 years, what is your character doing as a sort of sunset closeout to the campaign, right? On the other hand, if these are not going to be retired and you're going to continue to play with these, now you want to have a session where you take your player's handbook and hopefully a couple of them, and everybody can sit down and take the actual character sheets and make level 4 versions or use D&D Beyond or some other way to create the characters. I love making paper characters, but whatever is easiest. And you make level 4 PCs, right? You have leveled up at the conclusion of this adventure, your 4th level. You want to take some time to adjust to the new character sheet format and new options. As you're converting and leveling up on paper, allow rebuilding, right? You all maybe took turns DMing. You were playing these largely pre-gens. Now you can really start from scratch if you'd like and make these characters again, and maybe even changing them. Why not, right? You want to be a different species. 2 of you want to be the same background or use one of the backgrounds that there's a player's handbook. You can do that. You now have the full amount of rules before you. Now that you've learned from the starter set, you can use the actual player's handbook with everything that provides, or even other books to take in other options. And that can be a lot of fun to make these neat level 4 PCs your own. From there on, you can start a new campaign and make it up. You could, there's description here of there's another set of kind of caves or areas of danger that are not far from here. So you could go out and flesh that out, make that a campaign you want to explore. You could also travel from here to something else that happens, or weave in a pre-published campaign into the area. Maybe you bring one of the many 5th edition hardback books and use that as either something that happens in the environment nearby, in the environs, or again, travel to seek out that challenge. When you look at other campaigns to run that are pre-created, take a look and see whether they fit the type of play your characters are. It's worth looking at the reviews and seeing what the experience is like, whether it's the kind of campaign that the primary DM will want to run and that the players will enjoy, and then choose appropriately and have fun with that, with your characters continuing their story. A lot of the adventures start at level 1. Some have the ability to pick up at level 4, especially the older ones. But I will say that I've often, a couple times, I've started a campaign at 3rd level, and it really works fine. The only thing I don't do is I don't level up until they reach the level 4 content. So sort of get back to where you would have been, at that point where the characters would be level 4 in the adventure. Now they can begin leveling again. And that, just let the characters, the players know that you're doing that so that it's not surprised. You won't level for a while, but once you catch up to where you're level 4 in this adventure, we'll start leveling again. And that works fine. Wow, so that was a lot. The caves are bigger than the other 2 books, but we have now covered all 3 books. We've found ways to tie everything together, create, hopefully for you, a really neat way to go between the 3 booklets and feel like you've got some good approaches here. But you might have some other questions as you're running this, particularly as a new DM. If so, leave me questions and comments down below. I'll be glad to answer those. You can look at other resources out there. There's some great ones for how to get going. If you want to look at the Lazy DM series of books by my friend Mike Shea, those are fantastic. We also have books like The Forge of Foes over my shoulder there that can help you with really neat ideas as you become more advanced in how you tackle monsters. Lots of other advice out there. The world of becoming a player or a dungeon master in our hobby is fantastic. It's such a neat place, an exciting place to be a part of. I hope this series of videos on the starter set have been helpful to you. This is now my last one in this series. If you've enjoyed this and you are able to support me, I would appreciate that greatly. It helps me spend more time on videos. And you can do that by going to Patreon and searching for Alphastream. The link is also right down below here. And I would love to have you join our community where we have amazing people and we talk about all kinds of aspects of our hobby. It also ties into the community behind the Mastering Dungeons podcast, of which I'm my co-host, along with my awesome mentor and friend, Sean Merwin. And the 2 of us, every week, are covering all kinds of topics, other role-playing games, how to make 5th edition awesome. We have a lot of fun discussing the industry and the design behind of it. So as you get geekier and geekier, I highly recommend Mastering Dungeons. I might be a bit biased, but I hope you had a great time. It's been my pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you in a future video.